You got it.
Chéla Breckon, welcome to Power Presence Position.
Eleanor Beaton, thank you so much for having me.
This is such a fun conversation. And if you guys don't know who Chéla Breckon is, go check her out on Instagram with Chela. You'll want to after this convo. And one of the things, like, if you speak to you for more than 3 minutes, you're going to discover the importance and sort of the centrality of feminism and intersectional feminism to you as a leader, you as a person, and to the work that you do through with Chela. So I thought that we would just start by defining what it means to you to be a feminist leader.
Juicy. I'm so excited to kick it off with this question, Eleanor. This has been a journey for me. I would not have called myself a feminist leader 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So really, this is a journey, let's call it that. It's not a point on a map for me. It's certainly a process. And so when I think about what makes me a feminist leader from my own perspective, is that I truly commit to directing my decisions, my resources, my talents, my expertise, every possible angle that I can lever. I am focusing on, is there an outcome? Is there an impact on disrupting some systems of power that have kept women, in the positions that we experience day in and day out, operating in the context of the patriarchy? So to be really concrete about that, it means that the way I spend, the way I hire, the way I build benefits programs, all of those things really reflect how am I going to contribute and share my power, privilege, position, resources to be able to help all of us rise. And when I think about intersectional feminist leadership, it means that must contain context on the diverse lived experiences of women around me, that racialized women face a different pay equity than white women, that women from Indigenous communities face different employment outcomes, that women who live in larger bodies face different stigma that they have to overcome in the workplace. So those real interesting points of oppression start to inform how I approach my work, my pricing, everything. And it's just
and it's interesting because I think that what you're touching on here, this idea of different women have different lived experiences. And up until 10 years ago, we weren't really necessarily talking about that, about the different women. When we talked about feminism, that conversation was very much dominated by a specific type of woman, typically white and relatively educated and privileged. And look, it's not that being white and privileged and speaking from that place is wrong. That's okay. We're here for all of the voices.
We are.
But here's the question that I think is so interesting. It's like, so we know that women in our communities who we serve, who are our colleagues, have different lived experiences. So then the question becomes, what do you do with that? Like as a leader. So when you say, I think about it with respect to, it impacts what I do. Can you give me a specific example of how that understanding that different women are living different experiences, how that, what does that look like as a leader in terms of a decision that you make, and how, is there a specific example that comes to mind so we can put this into context for people to inspire them?
Absolutely. Great question, Eleanor. I think I'll frame this from two perspectives, because there's what I do outwardly with women and there's what I do inside my company. And so one of the greatest examples of this is a program I run out of Kingston, which is called Hire Yourself. And it is specifically for women new to Canada who have trouble achieving a job because they have a language barrier. They maybe have entered into a different kind of culture than they're used to, and they're trying to navigate the systems that Canada has. But generally, the purpose of the program is to offer culturally appropriate, language learner-centered curriculum and approaches that actually can bridge those outcomes in different, more dynamic ways to serve the intersectional realities of their lives. And when I say that, I mean exactly that. One of the women that I worked with in this program over the last couple of years, she was someone who came into Canada as a single mom. She has a language learning opportunity that she's working on, and she went to take a waitressing job to support her income generation. And she has a master's degree. And so when she's going through the job hunt, she wasn't able to achieve a position in anything related to her expertise because of her language. And then when she went to do the entry-level job, she didn't have enough income to be able to pay for daycare. And now she's basically at a deficit at the end of the day of making money. And then when she got into the waitressing job, she realized that the tips were pooled with the kitchen workers, with the different people in the back. And so now she actually did not have any opportunity to actually lever her skills in the ways that she could at home. And so we provide programming that helps to bridge those things and really create opportunities that address those unique and dynamic characteristics of the woman's experience. The way that we do that inside the company is we're working towards building a feminist fund. So what this means is that any one of my employees, let's say they need a leave, like right now, one of my executives was on a leave because her husband had a stroke. And so we have resources and pools of money that are set aside in order to continue to fund salaries during family caregiving leaves. And so that is just a concrete example about how we as a firm collectively pool some of our profits into funds, stipends that help with that. One of my female workers had to replace her car all of a sudden, and that was going to put her into a position of scarcity. And so we help to support the bridging of that. So when we think about those opportunities, we're really trying to sweep away some of the barriers and obstacles that are gendered, so that we aren't facing limitations in our work or in our impact with women because of those barriers or those things that come up because of our gender.
And it's interesting because I think, just in talking about that, it does put into different light the primacy of profit and cash reserves. So cash reserves are huge for me. It's a core sort of milestone that we talk about in all of our programming, because money can create a certain type of freedom. I'm just going to pause one sec before Pavel, Angela, this is a pause. Is there any way you can turn off your notifications?
Absolutely.
The dings? Yeah, we can clip this out. Then we'll have nice clean sound.
That should do it.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, wait, let me pull out a iMessage here. That should do it.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks, Queen.
Thank
you.
Okay.
We are back on, Pavel and Angela. We're back on. Okay. All right. So let me, so that comes back to this concept of pricing and profits, and how so often when we think about pricing where founders will sometimes struggle with pricing is, am I worth it? Can I charge this much? And a lot of times we can talk about that, and there's a big conversation and 100%, work, I think, that every founder does, especially when you're selling transformative work or you're selling work that it's intangible, right? However, when you elevate the conversation and you start running your business from the place of your mission, so it's like the seat of your business is anchored in your mission and in your vision, those kinds of conversations change because it's like, of course, you need to be pricing appropriately to have reserves so that you have the ability to not get thrown into the grind of scarcity on an ongoing basis.
You got it. Exactly. I mean, there is no doubt, woman, when you say rich women can change the world, I know that. It
Yeah.
is a key resource that
Yeah.
allows us to be able to unlock opportunities to help, to support, to rise. And when we do it as a collective, from a collective perspective in feminist approaches, everybody wins, right? So
Mhm.
certainly we are not shy about charging four figures and up for all of our products, but we also have entry points that are at the 2-figure level to still be able to consume our community and the curriculum and all the things we're doing. So we have like almost like a high low on each one of the things that we do. But we also take a lot of time to focus in and engage with NGOs so that we can offer free programming through government funds. So we're constantly thinking about access, right? Because access is the biggest thing and money fuels that. So when I think about, all of the ways that we show up in money generation and having those reserves, which you so carefully and conscientiously taught me over the last year working with you, is that we must have this stability. It enables sufficiency mindset. It gives us the power to grow from a place of abundance instead of gap. And it really gives all of the people around us the chance to know the safety net is there, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, but it funds the research that we do, the act of discovery, to be able to get those environments right, to know how to sweep away certain barriers.
Yeah. And to me, that really comes down to this concept, it's this concept of money and time.
Mhm.
And there are entrepreneurs who have money, but no time. And there's entrepreneurs who have a lot of time and no money. And a lot of times when you put those two things together, they're really powerful because they allow you to think deeply about your subject area, and to develop a body of work around that. So we're going to get into your body of work here in a moment, but I want to kind of take it back. So this approach, this feminist leadership approach, um, I would like to explore a little bit where it started. So if you can kind of take us back to your upbringing, your childhood, I'd love for you just to start by telling us a little bit about what was that like? What was your upbringing like? And then we'll take it from there.
Fantastic. Ooh, I love telling my life story. Um, Let me start. So, small town girl, I grew up in a town of like 4,000 people, the
What,
great,
what?
right?
Same.
Love it, right? But the fatal flaw for me in a small town was that I was sort of trapped in the same classroom of kids for, 8 or 9 years of my elementary school experience. And the trap of that is that if you're labeled something, you stay labeled that thing in a small town for probably your entire life. Let's just be honest about that stigma. So when I was a young girl, I was actually, I was living in a larger body since I knew it. I'm 6 years old. I was told that I was different. And by 10, I knew that I was very different. And so I faced a lot of scrutiny and judgment and bullying and things like that as a kid because of that. But it's interesting, I was also like a little hustler. I would like be at the end of my driveway selling my Barbie clothes and like monetizing my little.
Listen, you've been Chela from the minute you were born. I can 100% see that happening and going down.
Right. And so like I always would like come home after these really hard days at school and sport and things like that and just go, hello, like what are you not seeing? Like I feel like divine goddess inside and you're telling me I'm not enough. So I always had this weird like position of knowing I was whip smart. I was always the teacher's pet. That probably doesn't help at school, with these issues. But
That's right. That
but
can be
here
a hindrance and a help.
it can be, right? I sailed through school, but I didn't sail through the social side of school. But
And there's so many teachers' pets listening to this.
yeah, and they're like, we hear you.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And like, I'm still like that to a point. Like, I love sucking up to you in the incubator and whatever. But the big thing that I really think about there is that you know, I remember in grade 8 where I had gone through a huge transition in my family, a huge transition in school. I was heading out to high school and I thought, I don't want to be trapped here. I don't want to be labeled this. I know I'm not this. This is a limiting belief that someone else put on me. And I went to a high school in another town and into a city, and it just changed everything. I emerged as this like cool, fun. I was like head girl. I did all the stuff. I was like in going to all the parties. I was on the volleyball team. I did all the good stuff. I was like that girl in high school. And I realized that it was a lot about how other people saw me and how I saw myself, and that really is two totally different things. And that if I can show up a little more, expressing and feeling like I can just be myself, the more I stopped trying to fit in and just be myself, the more people liked it and like responded. So that experience really shaped my entire feeling of like self-belief and trust in my own abilities and stuff. And when I went off to business school after graduating high school, I continued to face opportunities, work, all sorts of really cool things, but all the while believing that my number one flaw was that I was fat, that I was overweight, that I was large, and that everyone around me would say things like, Chela, you're so accomplished. You're so smart. You're so beautiful. Look at that face. And they would say, if you would only lose the weight, you would have it all. And this is the core limiting belief that I chugged every day of my life. I was dieting from grade 9, probably grade 7 was the first time I restricted food intake, and then started dieting as early as age 14. And I went through in university and beyond, probably over a decade, I did 24 diets where I would cycle through like lose 25, gain 40. And by the time I was in second year university, I was over 300 pounds. It just kept piling on. And at the exact time where I was like focusing a ton of my energy in shrinking my body, I was gaining. And the exact opposite effect was happening. And the internal dialogue that was going on there was like, girl, you know how to get a Scully, you know how to get 90% grades, you know how to do all this, and you can't figure this out. It's calories in,
What's
calories
wrong
out,
with you?
like,
Yeah. And it's so, yeah. And that it's the splintering, it's that splintering of who you are and who you kind of think you should show up as. And that is so draining. And I want everybody to think about this. Like, you may have a different experience from Chela, but there's always a reason that splintering happens. And it just consumes so much energy and so much. And it doesn't mean you can't want to change if you want to change, but the thing is, when you want to change, you're going to change. The splintering energy is what is so, yeah. Oh, that's
a really good word. That's a really good word. I was just like, yo, when you said that, because that really is it. It's the split, and it's like coming to a convergence is actually freedom, and really understanding that the way I want to show up in the world, I can be completely the rule maker of that. It's just that I had to unpack it, right? I had to look at it. Who am I doing this for? Who benefits? Why am I doing it? Who told me to do this? All of those questions start framing the motivation to spend all this energy, to your very good point, which truly was a distraction. When I think about the good work I was doing in high school, like I was helping guys in grade 10 who couldn't graduate, grade 10 math, who couldn't graduate. They're 22 years old and I'm helping them to graduate. And meanwhile, I'm thinking they're holding my clothes, sucking in, trying to present in a certain way in that tutoring environment. Meanwhile, I'm helping to shape their trajectory into employment. And that's all I could focus on was how they saw me, and how was I hot enough? Was I cute enough? All those questions would cross through my mind. Is my weight a barrier?
Mhm.
you know, to my life. And so I finally just kicked the can. I had a group of doctors and surgeons convince me that I was genetically predisposed to storing. And so
Mhm.
the only way was surgery,
Mm.
you know? And so I thought, wow, I've proven to myself over 15 years that diets don't work, no matter how hard I tried. And so
Mhm.
I did it. I went for it. And I was the success
So you had
story.
like, are you talking gastric bypass?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
When I was 33. Okay. So, like, that's how
Yeah.
long it took me to convince me, by the way. So, let's
Yeah.
just be super real about this, that I always
Yeah.
saw surgery as the cop out.
Oh,
I always
interesting.
saw it as the easy way out. And as a grinder, as someone who wanted to do it the tough way and I'll just work out. I'll just work out 2 hours a
Because
day.
often the tough way, what I've learned about myself too, is that that addiction to the tough way
Mm.
is how you prove worthiness.
Bingo. Because I'm
Right. And it's like,
suffering.
all the time it's suffering. And that's just the price. It's like, look, if you're, and wow, there's just so much to,
Oh,
okay. So you decided to have the surgery.
yeah.
Now,
I
from where
convinced.
you sit today,
Mm.
so I want to look at two different things here, because one of the things that you kicked off this conversation with is to be a feminist leader is ultimately to allow ourselves to transform and change. And
Bingo.
because you talked about this is a process, and I could not agree more. It's like this process of awakening, I think, that just happens and you just get more and more awake. It's like first comes the realization, holy shoot, I've been asleep. I've been asleep. I was born into this culture, and you just get the shot of anesthesia right away. You
Right?
know? And then you fall asleep because of the splintering, and the splintering just keeps you asleep. Some people are like, what are they talking about? We're just like, um, you know, you'll find out. Keep listening. So at that time that you decided to go for the surgery, how did you look at it? And
Yeah.
then I'm going to ask you how you look at it now. So how did you look at it at the time?
Yeah. So
Cop out.
yeah, total cop. Like so like a year before, I said to my doctor, I was like, I'm going to give it a year. You have to prove it to me scientifically. This is my only path. I
I
was
can
like,
so see that conversation going down. Just
you
knowing
know, I
Chela, I
did,
can
right? I was like,
100% see that. Yes.
I want the endocrinologist, the surgeon, the this and the that to
I
all
want my
agree.
stats and my
Yeah.
data
I want my
presented to
readout.
me. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we agreed to take a year to really prove that this was the solution. And so, like, there we went. And then when the data came back and we tried every possible thing, like monitored at a scientific level, there was just like, it was so obvious, right? And I remember when the surgeon put my readout in front of me, there's a data metrics sheet I'd asked for, and she covered my mass and she said, when I look at this sheet, you read like an athlete. Like at the time I was swimming 5K a day. I was like working 12, 14-hour days, running around. I was healthy as shit, And
Yeah.
she was like, you deserve to look like an athlete. And so I said, you're right. I do. Let's sweep this last thing out of my life that I haven't been able to accomplish. Let's do it. So I signed on the dotted line. I had the surgery over Christmas so that I could recover while I was off, right, on vacation. And then basically, I began the journey of just like normalizing my new anatomy. And what I learned very quickly, like instantly, is that this was not a cop out. This was one of the most difficult recoveries and new lifestyles that I could have ever chosen. And in fact, the ball and chain of the dieting and restricting just transformed into how I now need to navigate my own anatomy. So it
Say
was.
more about that. What do you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when you have bariatric surgery, you can only eat in small increments. You can't drink after you eat. You have to really think about what you eat. Your body rejects certain food groups. It's very sensitive. Your whole digestive system changes, right? Because you remove most of the parts of your tract that do the processing. You have to process it in your mouth, And so it's a totally different experience to how to consume food. And so once I started going to like restaurants with my girlfriends and stuff like that, I was still the weirdo at the table that could only eat an appetizer.
Oh man, you
And
couldn't.
right? And couldn't have like the glass of wine between the courses because I can't drink for 30 minutes after, all these things. So what's interesting about people's perspective of surgery, which was my own, is that it's a cop out, it's easy, it's just like, and the weight comes off. Zero De Niro's, okay? That is not how it is. That is not how it is. It was a huge trial. However, I dropped 150 pounds in 18 months.
Wow.
I went down to half my body size. And that's when the perspective of my experience shifted enormously. So once I kind of creeped into normal, sort of average clothing sizes, I was a 12, and then I was a 10, and then I was an 8, and then I was a 6. And by the time I got down into kind of those ranges, I started observing things that I was alarmed by. Like people treating me differently. People who would never give me the time of day before wanted to hear from me. Men who were only friend zoning me before were now interested, right? I could literally stop traffic in my little town. Men would stop and ask me to walk in front of them in the middle of traffic, whereas before it would be jaywalking nightmare for hours, you know? And so these changes started to show up in my professional life. My manager started treating me differently. People in the workplace would start commenting on my body all the time. Wow, you look so good. You must feel so good. You must be so glad to have your health back. All of these things would come. And now the big brain stuff I was doing from before had this like weird overlay of like, oh, by the way, we don't see your work as much. We just see that face and that bod. And so it was almost like a veil in front of my performance potential and my work. And I was like burying the gifts and the services that the expertise that I could bring. It was overlaying it.
That's so interesting. So what you're saying is before you lost the weight, the work, the gifts, quote unquote, had to stand for themselves.
Right.
And after, it was the appearance and everything that means, and all of the, everything that creates and the dynamics that create actually impacted the work, which is so interesting because there's so many people here listening who I believe would say that not being conventionally attractive is a silencing factor. And you're saying, actually, from my experience and from my viewpoint, you might want to rethink that.
Yep. Exactly. Because like I can literally show you an email when I was 300 pounds where the client was like, we are so excited to hear your ideas. We can't wait for you to join us to hear what you have to say and help us. To fast forward 3 years later, the email that I got is like, we love your look. We can't wait to have you on stage. We know our audience will just love you.
Interesting.
You know what I'm saying, Queen? Like this is a big difference. And immediately I felt limited in a totally different way. Wow. I questioned whether people were working with me because they were attracted to my vibe and the way I was presenting versus what I was offering. And I started to get really confused about how to work with men because I'd never, and I mean like men that are maybe approaching things inappropriately in a professional setting. Like, let's just be clear, that's not all men. Yeah. But certainly, I was working in small town municipal government. And when I think about some of those experiences of being patted on the head and called babe and kiddo, those things didn't happen to me when I was 300 pounds wearing a power suit.
Interesting. So this was really the experience that for you kind of opened your eyes to intersectional feminism. Yeah. So where did you take this? So you're going through this period of change and you're starting to see the impact, the dynamics that this is having. What you thought would be like this final thing to clear away actually shows up as a different kind of weight, which is so interesting. Yes. Like a different kind of weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell us what happens next.
So the weight was a gate and the gate, instead of it being another thing to accomplish, it became an opening. And for that inward work that you referred to earlier about like doing the growth and being on a journey, my journey just got turbocharged with a NOS. Like I was just like, "Bah!" You know, because I started to really experience the dichotomy and the like polarity of what I had lived before and what I was about to embark on. And then I was also working in higher ed. And so that really pronounced it. So what I started to look at right away was why did I see that this was a problem? Who told me this was a problem? I had
And
to
by
start,
this, what do you mean by
the
this?
weight, right? The
Okay.
weight and the body
Okay.
image stuff,
Yeah.
right? Who convinced me and how? You know, and when I think about that one conversation with the surgeon about you deserve to look like an athlete, I just immediately thought about that of like, we need to redefine what an athlete looks like. Like, why is this what's being decided is my worth? And so that's when I started to explore all the other distractions of my life. Because, like, let's be fair, the economist in me had to do a metrics evaluation of all this.
Naturally.
Right. So I started to count the hours, the days, the time, the minutes that I had spent in distraction of serving other people's expectations of me. And I was like, you know, it was like a huge choking amount of time, years of my life spent serving other people.
And
Their
it's so interesting. You know, I think that one of the things that annoys me to no end, is when people talk about feminist conversations in business, or they'll talk about sort of, you know, in my area, which is in business growth and development, how do you actually support women entrepreneurs? And sometimes they'll say things like, you know, in normal conferences, there's no talk about personal development. Why are women's groups and organizations obsessed with personal development? And I'm like, why wouldn't you be? The fact that you don't think personal development is important to entrepreneurship or to business leadership is a part of the problem. Like that's to say that this is less important than a KPI. It's more important than a KPI. This is the conversation.
It
So
is the KPIs.
right, it is the KPI. And you
Yeah.
can't, you know, hello, our traditional model, has anybody read the UN climate report? Because the model of growth that we have all been worshiping forever is clearly broken. We need a different model. And I think the type of personal growth and awakening that you're going through is so, that you're talking about, or that you went through, is so critical. But I remember that moment when I really started seeing the weight of, you know, different kind of weight, but it's all weight, right? The weight of all the ways in which you're trying to show up according to somebody else's definition of what you should. I remember going through just this period of depression and grief about it.
Yep.
I was just like, oh my God, it's
It is.
devastating.
It is. It's like I was angry, to be very honest, because
Oh
like
yeah.
as a very efficient performative person, I was like, damn you. You know, I was like, you know, screaming literally. Like I remember reading the Diet Culture, the Anti-Diet, which is a book, and I was like, ah! I was like screaming into my bed, you know, my bedroom, when I was reading it. But like, what is so important about what you're saying about the inward work, the growth work, is that it's the leading indicator to all lagging indicators. It truly is. Like for myself, I see it in the way that I had to unpack why I want to rescue and fix all the problems and insert myself as the mop in all situations with all people, especially the people I really cared about. I had no boundaries about like when to access me and when I would like even just declare like I'm resting, I'm not coming to this event or whatever. I was constantly serving other outward expectations, to the point that I would like iron my curtains before my mother-in-law would come. Like, are you kidding me? So
I
like,
can't even see there's so much of what you've said where I was like, oh, I can 100%. I can't see that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you changed. You
Mhm.
changed.
Like
Mhm.
180. And this is what's so neat
Yeah.
about what I want to, what I share with women in my spaces, right? Because every single woman in business I've had the great fortune of working with, if we don't unpack and look at this stuff, she faces sometimes insurmountable barriers to her
And
success.
okay, yeah. And the thing is, in my experience going through it and working with female founders and leaders through it, those insurmountable barriers, they all feel external.
They do.
And dude, is a legit thing as external. Like we've been talking about it. There are totally systematic, legit, real barriers, like the story that you were talking about initially.
Right.
The problem is, without this kind of awakening, you are fighting that battle with like a quarter of the energy, because all the rest of your energy is spent holding up the people pleasing, the no boundaries, the worthiness issues, the this, the that, so much energy goes into that, and you don't have that energy to be free. Like, I think, when we think about the work that you're doing out in the world with clients, with organizations, with your team, all of that, the tremendous energy that, and it doesn't feel to me from you, sometimes people are putting out tons of energy and you're just exhausted watching it. For you, it feels like it's definitely a flow of energy, but that awakening that we're talking about, that I'm so passionate about making sure that people understand, I just started to see how much energy was going into upholding how we're supposed to be. And once you just, you don't even have to do much. You just have to kind of stop it. You just kind of are like, okay, I'm just gonna, whoa, I could just put this down.
Well, and this is what's so powerful about what you're saying, is that like, it's actually just about critical thinking and slowing down, right? Because, let's take this clean example for me. Like, I love makeup. I have always loved makeup. I love playing with makeup. It's
fancy,
like fun for me,
yeah,
right?
mm-hmm.
Love it. But I also understand that there's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that on my self-expression pedestal, that this is my creative palette. And that's exactly what it is for me sometimes. But that's only on the days where I don't leave the house and I paint. Okay. The days that I'm like showing up at a keynote, or the days that I'm showing up on a date, why? What's the motivation there? And so what I had to start looking at was like, sometimes I paint because I think I should. Sometimes I paint because I want to win. Sometimes I paint because I want to express. And so what I do is I just kind of examine those motivations, and I honor the fact that it's been groomed into me that I have to show up in certain like professional places looking a certain way, and that I also have a desire. And so there's this weird place where we kind of live around those issues. And like, this is a super simplified example, but this is how I think, so that I can then know consciously what is motivating, what is the currency behind my behavior, what is driving
yeah
it,
And totally. And it's interesting because an earlier version of me would have had those very similar conversations and wouldn't have made room for the parts of me that said, because I think I should, because actually I'm afraid that if I don't show up looking my best self, people won't take me seriously. I will look washed out, and that will be the energy that I'm putting out into the room. And I'm afraid of showing up without that. So there's an earlier version of me that would have been, that's ridiculous, who would have been saying basically to that voice, shut up. Yeah. And what I find now is that what you're talking about, it's the wholeness, right? It's the ability to acknowledge there's a lot of different dimensions to who we are. They're all okay. And it's not about fixing them. It's about sort of acknowledging them and bringing them on. And I actually talk to them. I'll talk to them. Like, I was lifting weights the other day, and I was like, I was lifting weights the other day, and I was like, oh, my boobs look weird in my bra.
Like, as in,
I was like, my boobs look weird in my bra. And I immediately was like, should I put on a sweater? And then I was like oh, hey, I hear you. Listen, we're not going to put on the sweater. I get that you want to put on the sweater because you feel, and it was this little conversation. It happened over 20 seconds in my mind.
Yep.
And we did not put on the sweater and it was fine.
Well,
you
and
know,
this is
but
it,
that's
Eleanor, you know,
right. Like that's wholeness.
that's a great example. I feel that sometimes too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just
Like, do
those
my
little
boobs look,
moments.
oh, my boobs look
Yeah.
weird.
And I think, you know, and I think what's interesting about my experience as well is that I'm also compelled to serve. Like I love my family. I want to help out. I want to help my community. You know, I often choose to pick up the mop and help and in mess cleanings that I didn't make, you know.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that before I would just default into that sort of, you know, rescue mode, bringing my big mop and all my bleach with me and put all my effort into it. And then now when I take a look and have that same sweater moment when I think about service to others, I still choose caregiving. I still choose service. I just know that I'm conscious about who told me and who benefits. I just examine those two things.
It's
And
a
so,
sovereign decision.
right, it's agency, it's true
Yeah.
agency. And that for me just reflects that whole principle of feminism is that in order to have informed choice, we must understand the context in which the motivation was formed. So if we've been groomed to believe it, we've been told we must, we've been, you know, decided we want to, all of those things are just part of the data, the things that we would consider to lever a decision from with true agency, because agency is limited. Your ability to choose is limited if we don't have all the info, and that involves an examination of how we operate in the context of the patriarchy.
100%. And to me, you know, where I see this coming up a lot for entrepreneurs is in these two different areas. One is hard work and putting in the work, and the
Yep.
other is in ambition.
Bingo.
And, you know, and it's so interesting because I think we'll have conversations about this. And to me, hard work, is it important? Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie, you know, hard work is definitely important. I definitely think there's a culture of overwork. To me, the difference between overwork and hard work is that overwork is feeling like you have to put it in order to be worthy.
Yes.
Feeling like you have to. Hard work is the want to. It's the place of sovereignty. They're very different things. And I feel like so much of the conversation around overwork misses this important thing that for women to succeed in the type of business culture we have, why is it that women feel like they have to check 100% of the boxes because versus guys who 50%? Because guess what? They do. You know, they had to be twice as good. It's not that we're dumb and it's not like we don't have any confidence. It's that we understand we have been raised in a system where we do have needed to have 100, you know, tick 100% of the boxes. So that to me, and then the same thing with ambition. I think ambition is a powerful energy. And what I see so often, and I certainly experienced it myself, is that ambition can sometimes have its heart in scarcity. And I have no time or space for ambition that's anchored there versus in what we're talking about here, which is agency and full expression of who you actually are. That's when ambition is all day long. We'll go to the wall, you know.
Like, can we just etch this in stone, these 2 points you've made, because they are truths. They are truths. You experience them all the time. I experience it in your spaces, these conversations. And what's so powerful, like in 2019, I had a really bad snowmobiling accident and I had a concussion, was off for 12 weeks.
Okay, rural girl, by the way. Okay,
No.
listen, a snowmobiling accident.
Yeah, like I'm a motorhead. Like I drive a sports car. I've been in a motorsport club with my family, had a motorsport club like years. I love racing. I was turning wrenches before I was playing with Barbies. So I certainly love this, you know, sporting world and rural enjoyment, but certainly this incident, a concussion, I mean, if anyone's not familiar, it's basically you can't look at a screen, you can't read, you can't take phone calls, you can't be in crowds. To heal properly, you actually need to do this like hour by hour cycling process. And 12 weeks in my condo, not working. I faced a complete like identity crisis. I was like, who am I if I'm not working? You know,
Right.
and like, what am I like? I'm cooking, I'm like making tea, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'm like just completely like the dry lemon in the back of the drawer for like 3 months. You know, I couldn't work my full-time job. I had to use all my vacation. I couldn't work my consultancy. I was just dead. And I had to do this really deep examination about like, what if I had a permanent brain injury from this incident? Who would I be? And this questioning brought me to what your first point was, which is about that I connected my worth to performing. And let me tell you, can I just like, I don't even think you know this, but there was a moment when I first met you where you said your motto was something, he was a podcaster and in power presence position, where you said, I am devoting myself to the woman I'm becoming. And I then was also looking at what my divine worth was, my inherent worth was. And I developed a motto of 2020 based on this you brought to me, and my other powerhouse contributor, empowerment coach. She and I and you worked, you didn't know this, but we developed this motto that I said was devotion to my divinity, which meant that I am going to honor that just being, I am whole. Just being, I am enough. Right. And so that started an exploration for me of like how often I would put up this most beautiful body of work to a client and go, is it enough, sir? You know, and like all those things, I started looking at how
Penny
often.
farthing. Is it enough, sir, for a penny or a farthing? Where that came from.
I love that you're doing that with me. Like they were going into this, like, may I have another? You know,
a penny or a farthing, please.
But this is it. This is it, right? This is exactly like how you have to have humor about this. I genuinely believe that humor, one of my clients preaches that humor is a killer of resilience. Dr. Robin, she's amazing. So basically what I'm saying is that I had to look at this. I chose to look at this. I stretched, I burdened, you know, and what I found was that I could actually learn to start normalizing, separating my work from my worth. And that work is a choice, it's a gift, it's a privilege, it's an opportunity. But even if that all goes away, I'm still a bad bitch and I'm still going to be showing up in this world as my genuine self and absolutely valuable in that place. So yeah, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And you know, one of the other things that I'll just top off that little note with is that I heard from this amazing woman. She's a mediator out of the Ottawa region. And she told me her thing is that she sees that men are like the sun, and like, these are big, broad brushstrokes. Let's just underline this. Yes. Men are like the sun and women are like the moon, because men have been taught in business that in life, that they can just direct all their energy at work and money making, and that all the other things in the peripheral of their lives will be held together by their spouse, by their partner, by their wife, whatever. And that women, we take that light and reflect it all everywhere.
Interesting.
And so we are trying to make a difference in our household, in our communities, in our business, and we're trying to do it in a glow that lights up the entire night. Yeah. And so when we think about dialing the light up, we're, the overperforming that you talked about, this is when we're trying to be both the sun and the moon. Yeah. And girlfriend, they don't come into the sky at the same time very often.
No. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that and that's the thing about being a feminist leader, an intersectional feminist leader. I think to me, it's all about understanding context. And so it's really about that anchoring in the context and from that place. So let's not talk about overwork. Let's not talk about how important hard work is unless we talk about what drives that hard work, and is that healthy, and is that what you want and intend? And I think from that place of wholeness and awareness, work becomes very different. It's not because you have to, it's because it's, again, that expression. Look, we could talk forever. We're at time. So let's talk about, Chela. So you got to go. I love being connected with you on Instagram with Chela. Where else can people go to learn more about you and the incredible work that you are doing with your team? Where should they go? Where should we send
Oh
them?
my goodness. Well, certainly check out my articles on LinkedIn. We have a lot of sort of our bodies of work expressed, our thoughts and ideas, approaches on LinkedIn in articles, but our website is certainly our base, withchela.com. You can check us out there, join our newsletter. It's called Detour. It's all about sort of looking at the alternative routes and embracing this. So check that out. And we are actually launching a podcast coming up this fall called The Rebel Rule Woman. And I'm going to be pitching on all the fun stories that I introduced today and talking about the small town context and women inside it and how important it is to really understand that rural communities are powerhouses and the women inside them are the big deals in their community. And certainly, Eleanor, I just want to take this moment to say that I would not have gotten here without your education and supportive communities. I have so loved consuming your products, being a part of your community. And, Queen, I think about you and what you teach and the approach that you take more than I'm in your spaces. Like, you have to know that this has deeply shaped my outcome, my profits, my revenue, my team. Everything has been shaped by what you have taught me. And I cannot celebrate enough the quality and caliber of women that show up in your spaces. You attract women just like me that think big, play big, and do it from that place. And so, keep going. I keep going. And I hope that we can continue to grow as women in business together, because you're slaying, I'm slaying, your clients are slaying, my clients are slaying, because we know we've got the goodies.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So exciting. Yeah. It's a good collaboration.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.